Okay, well, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Young, for the department expenditures discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board, tonight we'll discuss specifically department expenditures. I know that this has been a protracted waiting period. As you all are fully aware, we actually had to start the whole budgeting process over again in light of the current state of affairs in the county. So if you please bear with me. Next slide. The clicker's not working. Here's our agenda. Next slide. So, board, as you're aware, once we had started receiving signals that we were going to enter into a recession, or at least a significant depression of suspended revenue, the staff took direct action to basically sharpen their pencils and prepare a different budget proposal to bring before the board versus the one that, is drastically different than the one that you all entertained approximately 4 or 5 weeks ago. I put together on the screen before you basically the approach and directives that I provided to our directors to guide the updating of their department requests. And as you all are fully aware, we were directed to delete pay raises for county employees, remove capital purchases to include vehicles and furnitures from their budget request, suspend non-essential travel, no additional positions, meaning that we'll maintain the current staffing levels in fiscal year 2021 that we currently have in fiscal year 1920. And I also suspended the annual payment to the debt mitigation fund. I want to iterate that all of these are budget proposals, simply my recommendation. Of course, we're going to bring that budget proposals and recommendations to the board, and it is up to you all to determine just how far do you think that we're willing to go, or if you all want to see changes in the budget proposal. I should also state that when I suspended non-essential travel, that means that I struck the budget from the county administrator's budget for travel and the budget for travel and the supervisor's budget. So if that's something that's too proactive and too advanced, by all means, let me know and we can definitely adjust that, just making a budget recommendation. What we did was get a good figure on essential travel for the county. We talked to all the different department heads, got a good understanding of what travel that they needed to keep up their certifications and their continuing education. And then from those numbers, we added a small percentage of contingency for unexpected travel, and we put that into one pot of money. And our intent is to actually approve travel requests next year on a case-by-case basis. Next slide. So with those instructions, this is an updated slide regarding the budget impacts for the fiscal year 2021 budget. As you all know, we have budget impacts that we simply can't get away from. These are mandatory impacts, which include a 1.7% increase to our VRS, a 0.03% increase in life insurance, a decrease to our contribution to the Juvenile Detention Center, an additional $191,466 to the Rappahannock Regional Jail, and an additional $28,008 for health insurance. As stated before, all those optional programs that you saw before, which included additional positions, even taking a look at funding to update our zoning ordinance, our subdivision ordinance, has been stripped. So the optional programs come at a budget impact of $0. So all told, budget impacts to the fiscal year 2021 budget comes to a total of $1,414,462. We can have questions, or I can continue the presentation, but yes, sir.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Bush.
So, Dr. Young, thank you very much for taking a deep look at this, but I do have some things that were mentioned that I have some concern about. One, you have suspended non-essential travel. For that, I commend you very much. I think it's thank you very much, Megan. I think it's clear that the Board of Supervisors does not need to be taking travel, except for things that we need to do. I know as for me, I'm prepared to do that out of pocket. However, we can't be isolationist. With a lot of things going on, let's say NACO, VACO wise, I truly do not believe that the Board of Supervisors needs to travel to attend those. However, we need to be in the loop of what's going on at those levels, which is why I think for continuity purposes, I would still like, me personally, I would like the county administrator who has a full understanding of everything going on in the county, and since you also sit with the service authority, to be privy to things that are going on in those outside organizations. I would like to see travel at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors, of course. I would like to see that travel continue, and your relationships with our interagency partners, our state, regional, and even federal partners. I would like to see that relationship continue to where you could at least bring information back to us and brief us on that. So that's one thing. I would like to see some monies allocated towards you being able to travel, of course, at the discretion of my colleagues. Second, the big thing that struck a chord with me is the suspension of our payment to our debt mitigation fund. This is something that the board worked very hard on, previous board, that I'm very proud of, that I think did a great service to our taxpayers. It frees up monies in cash flow that goes into our budget by decreasing our interest payment. My concern is if we were to scratch that now, given the recession that we're facing, which there is no doubt, I absolutely concur we are facing a recession. With that said, this is a policy. I do not want this board to set a precedent of being able to scratch a policy because of revenue issues, because then subsequent boards, the future, could look at this and say, well, we have a project that maybe we want to cash fund. So we're going to use the monies that we allocated towards the debt mitigation payment, and we'll just pay that next year and next year and next year. This is something that we worked very hard on to be able to address a very real issue that the county is facing, and that's our debt. That is not going away. Now, it's my understanding that this is $190,000 that we're talking about to pay the debt mitigation. Now, if we want to scratch it from the budget and the funding that we have right now, if that's what my colleagues want to do, I'm fine with that. What I would suggest is, and I know we're not prepared to discuss this tonight, but previous correspondence that we have received from you is that Waste Management is looking at increasing the tonnage, and that's going to bring in additional revenues. My request would be, if we're going to scratch the debt mitigation payment from the budget, I would like to revisit the debt mitigation payment during our CIP process and at least be able to make that payment and keep our debt mitigation plan moving, because it's working. We freed up cash funds or cash flow that has gone back into our budget. We need to address our debt, and I believe we need to stick to the plan that we worked out. And if the increased tonnage, if the $190,000 can be met through that, I'm more than willing to do that. What I'm not willing to do is scrap our debt mitigation payment altogether. That's my 2 cents. And then the last thing, I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you. The last thing is, we are keeping intact the public safety that we voted on in a previous budget work session. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We are. This does include our commitment that was made to the public safety officials.
Okay. Well, would you be willing to, and I'm sorry to catch you off guard, are you prepared to talk about the debt mitigation plan, if that's something that we could possibly do through our CIP process?
Yes, sir. So a couple of things. Regarding travel and isolationism, I'm definitely not promoting that, and definitely making recommendations based off of prudent fiscal considerations. Um, as stated before, there is some padding and some contingency in that pot of monies for contingency travel. So if the board so designated, whoever the board designated to that, hey, this training is or this conference is especially important, we want to see somebody there. There will be monies there. Me personally, I don't think that I'm the right person because usually when I go to VACO events, say like VACO Local Government Day, it's a one-day event. I don't use a hotel. I don't charge the government mileage. You know, I just put it on my calendar. Hey, I'm going to Richmond. I'll be back before close of business, and I'm more than happy to pay the conference fee because they're usually minimal, $80. I could pay that myself. If I felt that the training was just, I mean, that conference or meeting was just that important. So I don't see a need for me to take away from the pot of monies because I don't have any specific travel or training that I've been through that I see is absolutely necessary to actually charge the government to attend. But there is monies available if the board wants to send one of our elected officials to an event that's going to be like overnight or a multi-day event. Regarding the debt mitigation payment, I think, well, yes, we can. It's our financial policy. It's not a state statutory requirement. If the board decided that, hey, we wanted to remain committed to the debt mitigation fund payment, which I am as well, I'm just concerned about how is it paid for. Should it be paid against the general fund? I would highly suggest against it because that is the tax generating pot of monies. If you all wanted to move forward with lobbying that against the capital fund, then I mean, we have the monies, we have the fund balances, we have the pots of money there to make that payment and remain to that commitment out of the capital fund if the board so desired. I just highly recommend that we don't utilize the general fund and the operating budget as it means this year to pay for that debt mitigation annual payment.
Thank you very much, sir.
Does anybody else have any discussion on those?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Kupka.
Thank you. I think Dr. Young made it pretty clear that travel would be case by case, and I'm comfortable with that. I think all of us can police ourselves. We all know what's reasonable and appropriate, particularly given the financial situation that we're looking at here. So I agree with him. I'd like to just keep it how he has it set up. And with regard to debt mitigation, I applaud the previous board for what you all did. I would absolutely 100% be against leveraging the general fund to continue that policy. So if we can possibly revisit it during capital process, but that is not a burden I'm willing to pass on to the taxpayers right now, given the circumstances that we face, that they face, that we all face together. Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Removed capital purchases, vehicles and furniture. So are you talking about when we get to the capital improvements portion where we're going to be talking about school buses and ambulances, or are you talking about under the $50,000 threshold?
Under the under the $50,000 threshold, as you're all aware, from time to time, for example, General Properties needed a vehicle. They were
Yes.
going to replace a truck. The administration that asked me to replace the van. There were some vehicle requests from the Fire and Rescue Department and the Sheriff's Office. So there were furniture requests from the Commissioner of Revenue. So those are the purchases that I'm referencing specifically, not the capital projects like the school buses and ambulances and Fire Rescue Department. And fire trucks. But to be totally transparent, there are 3 vehicles that I deemed absolutely necessary to sustain operations. The Sheriff's Office originally requested 5 replacement vehicles to add to their fleet. However, I negotiated with the sheriff and we decided that, okay, the sheriff could sustain himself in fiscal year 2021 with 3 vehicles versus 5, and we'll take a look at replacing additional vehicles once we get through the recession.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
And I agree with Ms. Kupka on the travel budget, and just keep it the way it is that you have, Dr. Young, and we can revisit it. I know I had several conversations with you about to make sure that if we do bounce back quickly, that we can revisit our budget and add in things that were originally there to keep going on the path we were going before this all happened.
That's a good
And I
point,
thank you.
ma'am. I don't do a good enough job of explaining to not only the board, but more importantly to our staff that, hey, this is the bare bones skeleton budget that we're presenting just to sustain operations. If things pick up, then there are processes in place that we'd be able to move forward, come back to the board and say, hey, we want to go through our budget amendment process. And that's definitely illegal and it's definitely an option, you know, if 6 months from now, the current state of affairs change. So thank you for reminding me on that, ma'am. That's absolutely correct. This is just the budget recommendation for the current state of affairs, and we could definitely revisit it if it's deemed necessary 6 months from now.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Stonehill, I see you're now online. Would you have a discussion on this, or you want to watch a little bit and then give your questions? You guys see him in the boardroom?
One
That's
second,
okay.
ma'am.
Well,
He's
you keep
Chris is working on unmuting him.
Gotcha. I see he's unmuted now. Mr. Stonehill? Well, Dr. Young, why don't you continue on, and then I'll get Mr. Stonehill first on the next round of questions.
Roger that, ma'am. Next slide. So now we're going to run through, and Chris, if you could take those other boxes, minimize those other boxes. We're going to run through each department's expenditures, starting with the legislative, which is the Board of Supervisors, admin, which is myself, and the courts. And we'll run through those, and I'll stand by answering the questions that you may have. Just to orientate you to the slide, as you'll see, we have our actuals. And again, I never had good luck with this pointer, but you have your actual budgets, expenditures from fiscal year 17 all the way through 19. Then we have the adopted fiscal year 20 budget. We have the amended budget, which accounts for carryovers and things that carry over from year to year. And we have our original department request for fiscal year 2021. Then you'll see the severe cuts that were made by the county administration and the finance department and the resulting budget requests. It should be stated that the most important data points on these slides is the fiscal year 20 adopted budget versus the fiscal year 2021 preliminary budget. So again, I'll stand by. This is legislative, general administration, and judicial administration. Terrible.
Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, next slide. This is public safety, public works, health and welfare, Department of Social Services, and Parks and Recreation.
Dr. Young, I have a real quick question about Parks and Rec.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that also add in now the maintenance of the Buckler House?
Yes, ma'am. That takes the Buckler House into consideration as well.
All right, thank you.
It should also be stated that these cuts are severe. Never seen this much red in my tenure with the county. However, each cut and each resulting budget was a negotiation between myself and the directors, and basically it was it's a shared understanding and agreement that this is the budget that they agree upon, and I agree upon, can actually sustain operations for that respective department through fiscal year 2021. So it wasn't done in a vacuum.
What under Public Works, what is litter control? Is that just picking up the trash cans or?
Litter control is pseudo funded by a grant from the state, but Ms. Kupka is fully aware. They provide us monies for equipment to actually clean up litter on the roadside. Last year, we actually had a program where we actually met. That it was a program that was led by the Solid Waste and Recycling Department. Went along Birchwood Road and different secondary roads in the county, and actually utilized that equipment to pick up the litter. And then some of the funding was actually utilized to pay for food to give to the volunteers after the event was completed.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on this one?
Okay, next slide. That then brings us to community development, public works, economic development, and our non-departmental funding, which includes the schools, Smoot Library, contingency, all those non-county departments.
What's the non-departmental?
Which one is that, sir? Let me see.
91700.
Yes, sir. The non-departmental, that's where we actually used to track, where we normally track the county pay raises. As you remember, we had originally $370,000 that were requested for annual pay raises. We struck that by $275,000. The reason why there's still a balance of approximately $100,000 or $95,000, that's the line that we're utilizing as the pot of monies for travel to approve on a case-by-case basis.
Tracking, thank you.
Any questions on this section?
I'll stand by because I know there's a lot of information to digest. So. Okay, if you now refer to the bottom of the screen, you'll see that bottom line that's highlighted in blue. All right, thanks, Chris. The pointer's working for me now. All right, last year's adopted operational budget, which is circled in purple, for expenditures for $46.2 million. After restarting our budget process and making additional cuts in accordance with the fiscal guidance that I provided to our departments, as you can see here, you'll see that we were able to cut $1,452,231 of requests this year and bring the fiscal year 2021 budget in at approximately $47.5 million. As a result, our tentative budget will be approximately $1.2 million higher than last year's. It is important to note that $414,000 of that $1.2 million is a result of the mandatory budget impacts. So it's not additional spending by our departments. Traditionally, we rely heavily on revenue projections to absorb budgetary increases. However, I believe that our current state of affairs will not afford us to significantly address our requirements in fiscal year 2021. Therefore, I believe that we're going to recommend utilizing our revenue stabilization fund to cover the gap between our requirements and our means. And I think that that's the best way forward, because I think that I have a good understanding from the board's desire, which is not to pursue a tax increase for King George County citizens this year. So if we're not going to pursue a tax increase to cover that gap between expenditures and revenue, then we have that option, thankfully, of utilizing our revenue stabilization fund to bridge our operations and sustain the government through fiscal year 2021. It should be noted that according to our fiscal policy, Well, I'm sorry, there's two things that should be noted about the Revenue Stabilization Fund. Number one, our financial policies require that whatever monies are used from the fund must be replaced the following fiscal year, if we can. And then number two, the fund has a balance of $2.4 million. Therefore, we have to be careful of not depleting this fund, as we may have to rely on it again in fiscal year 22-23 if the national recession persists beyond a year. And we just don't know what that looks like at the moment. This brings me back to our discussion regarding the schools. I understand that they have a budget of $927,000 increase to the local contribution in fiscal year 2021. However, this proposal that I presented to you all takes into account the marker that you all provided me, which was to level fund the local contribution and utilize that as a planning guide to put together the budget. So that's where we currently stand. With level funded local contribution to the schools, we end up with approximately $1.2 million, or half of the Revenue Stabilization Fund being utilized. And that's being conservative at the moment because we haven't done the revenue projections. If the revenue projections are even more depressed than what I am planning right now without seeing those numbers, then I have to estimate that we're probably gonna have to go between 1.2 to 1.4 million dollars taken out of that balance. If we added the $927,000 request that the school is asking for the local contribution, basically that would require that we take $2.1 million out of the $2.4 million balance of the Revenue Stabilization Fund. And I'm very concerned about that. And that's why, though I'm a big fan of the schools, and of course I'm very supportive of the schools, it's my recommendation that we level fund the local contributions to the schools and utilize that local contribution along with these requirements for county operations, and utilize the rate stabilization fund to serve as their bridge for the fiscal year 2021 budget. I understand that if we do go that route, fiscal year 22-23, bottom line, we're going to be starting over in the hole. And I say that because if we're going to abide by financial policy, we got to understand that whatever revenue generated in 2022-23, the first priority is, well, that revenue is actually not going to fund balance or going to surplus. Those monies are actually going to have to go to replenishing that fund so we can make sure that we have money tucked away for another recession or another rainy day. Next slide. So with that being said, at the next budget work session, I plan to have completed our revenue forecast, identified the budget gap, and bring the board a final proposed budget. With this proposal, I will ask the board for approval to advertise a public hearing. If we can schedule the work session 7 days from today, we'll then be able to meet our 7-day advertising requirement and host our public hearing with enough time for the Treasurer's Office and the Commissioner of Revenue to do their respective jobs. So this is the proposed schedule that I have for the board for setting work session dates and the public hearing and the budget adoption, which aligns with the first Board of Supervisors meeting in May. And if the board can accommodate that schedule, we'll be able to get the budget adopted in a timely manner. And then the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer can go ahead and print tax bills and give our citizens more than enough notice for the June 5th tax payment date. So, board, with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I stand by for additional questions.
I'm good with
Who
those
would like
dates.
to go first? Any questions?
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Granger, you want to go?
Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
I was just saying, looking at the dates, I don't know if we want to hammer that out real quick. I'm assuming probably most of us, again, are probably pretty open.
I'm very busy.
But I'm fine with the schedule that's laid out here if everyone else is amenable.
Madam
I'm
Chair.
fine with the date. Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may. I really like how aggressive you're being with the scheduling and hammering this out so we can adhere to this timeline. The only question I would ask is, are you and your staff able to turn this around that quickly in 1 week? I ask you to consider that, knowing that it's now Passover and Easter time. I just want to make sure, Friday is Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday. I want to make sure that your staff is going to be here and can back you up and turn this around that quickly, being mindful of the circumstances and the situation.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's aggressive and we're humping. It's basically pedal to the metal. But luckily I have a staff, specifically in Wilma Ward and Barbara, that's just as committed as I am and understands the importance of going and getting this budget to completed, especially now that we're behind. So they're 100% committed. I spoke with them privately and asked them, hey, this is the schedule that I'm going to present to the board. Is this problematic? Because I know you all got to crunch numbers, and I know I got to work a weekend. They're committed. I'm committed, and we're not going to have any problems of getting that to the board in accordance with the schedule.
Okay, that'll work for me. Thank you.
Right, the only question I have is on the public hearing side. If we are still under what we're on right now, how do we handle that public hearing?
Yes, Madam
Are we
Chair.
still
I know that we've been putting out KG alerts and established a policy that we're suspending public hearings through an unforeseen date. However, we can easily put out the same KG alert and explain that, hey, we got to sustain our government operations, and therefore, in accordance with state code, we got to advertise the public hearing and make the public aware of that. And then we'll just go through our routine process of doing the newspaper notification, the website notification, and posting the notifications in our buildings. And we'll utilize our go-to-meeting process, just like we do with any board meeting, to entertain public comments on the budget, and we'll be able to meet state code requirements.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Bush, did you have anything?
I would just like to thank Dr. Young and his staff for their dedication, working weekends and on this very aggressive schedule. Thank you. I know it's beyond your job description, but you recognize what we have to get done, and you're getting it done. So, thank you.
I appreciate that, sir. But again, a lot of the heavy lifting is done in that finance department, and I'm humbled by the way that they've really been moving to make sure that we meet the needs of the county. So they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and their efforts are definitely appreciated.
Mr. Stonehill, do you have anything?
No, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Well, I can.
Okay.
And we can hear you in the
All right,
boardroom.
well, sorry for logging on late. I was trying to get somebody out of the water and loaded into the squad, so I apologize for my tardiness. And I did look at everything this afternoon, and I was, I'm okay with everything here. I didn't have a whole lot, any other questions, but I will echo Mr. Bush's remarks, saying thank you very much to Dr. Young and finance and the whole staff for getting this punched out and dealing with all the other things that we're dealing with right now. It's doing a great job. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Dr. Young, do you have anything else?
I think Ms. Kupka had another question, Madam Chair.
All right, Ms. Kupka.
If I may, Madam Chair, I feel like in the last week I saw one of our neighboring localities, might have been Stafford, published on social media and their website a formal collected mechanism by which citizens could deliver public comment for, given the circumstances that public hearings have been suspended, rather than having them email their individual supervisors. I feel like there was a portal or a central website or some kind of login or survey place that perhaps Mr. Dines could take a look at that and see what they did or what other localities are doing, just so we can say we made sure to have as much public input on this budget process as possible, given the extraordinary circumstances that we cannot, in good conscience, safely host a public hearing.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I know exactly what you're referring to. Matter of fact, we had a meeting with our county administrators today, and they're doing that process because basically they're playing catch up with us. They don't have a go-to-meeting platform, and so they actually have to of course, they can't just go buy one now or actually subscribe now. So they actually had to utilize some type of social media platform to accommodate public comments since they don't have an interactive software to engage with the public. The only value that I really saw in what they did, and I would recommend that we do as well, they just extended and promoted public comments, for extending a period of time. So rather than us wait and encourage public comment the day of the meeting, we could put out a KG alert a week before saying, hey, we need your public comments. This is coming. Public comments are highly encouraged. I can even put out my email, or LaWanda's or Megan's and say, hey, if you have public comments for this budget, please refer to this email, submit public comments there, and they could serve as a data collection point. And we could just start advertising and promoting public comments for the budget 7 days before the public hearing. That won't be a problem. We could do that. As soon as it's advertised in the newspaper, I can talk to LaWanda and Megan, and we can go ahead and start advertising and encouraging comments on the budget.
I think that makes a
So
lot
we
of
can
sense.
probably put that on our website, and, my colleagues can use their Facebook, and I can use Twitter, and push that out also to have citizens, if they have a comment, give us their feedback.
Yes, ma'am. And so if we want to, we can do that 7 days out. As soon as it's advertised in the newspaper, which we plan on advertising April 16th if the board is so desired to move, we can definitely highly advertise, encourage public comment. And I think Megan is volunteering for you all to advertise her email at the collection point for public comments on your respective social media platforms. And we'll definitely gather those notes up and make sure it's ready to be read into the public record.
That sounds great. Thank you, Megan, for offering that. So I guess that would it. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Madam Chair, I just want to make it abundantly clear because I know that we are conversating, but just to make sure I have at least a board consensus, because it's been a topic, not a heated topic, but it's been a topic in a discussion with the board. But is the board on board with the level funding of the local contribution? I just want to make sure that
Yes.
we're going to continue moving forward with that planning piece to go ahead and do the revenue projections and the budget proposal.
I am, yes.
Absolutely.
I think we gave the school board direction as far as what our expectations were, given the circumstances during this current budget season, so yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I agree with that. Mr. Stonehill?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, we'll utilize that planning piece to go ahead and, again, put together the budget proposal and utilize that to balance against the revenue projections. And we'll have a budget proposal for you all to consider April 15th. And that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
All right, and then it will be April 15th at 6 p.m. also?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn until April 15th at 6 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Right, any nays? Chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for doing the GoToMeeting again. And thank you for everybody who helped out.